Hello, I'm Ellen Vandermeide, Head of Enrichment Programs for the Kirk Newman Art School, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you today Luke Zimmer. Luke Zimmer is one of our current photography residents. With degrees in journalism and anthropology from Indiana University, Bloomington, Luke Zimmer's particular interest lies in using photography to capture and tell the everyday stories of people in beautiful and compelling ways. Images that not only explain the world, but also invite the viewer into new ways of being and new ways of seeing the human landscapes around us. It's now my pleasure to invite Luke Zimmer up to the podium.
All right. Unfortunately, I had a hard time finding images for my slides, so it's all text. I'm just kidding. That's a joke. All right. And I'm going to go without notes here, so hopefully I remember everything that I was going to talk about. But my name is Luke. I am the current photography resident here at the KNAS. Before I get started, I want to give a special thanks to my advisor, Mary Whalen. It's been fantastic, not just going through this residency process, but also getting to know Mary, getting to work with Mary, getting her feedback on all this work that I've been doing, and it's been a fantastic learning experience. So thank you, Mary. So a little bit about our presentation today. So we're going to go through my background, my past work, take a little bit of a look at the residency so far in pictures, talk a little bit about the work that I've got in progress, and then if you've all got any questions, then we can go through some of those. First off, my background. So I grew up in northern Indiana on this lake here called Lake Gage. In a little farm where I had lots of opportunities to explore nature and do all those sorts of things. And one of my favorite things to do when we went on family vacations, my mom would always get us, I grew up in the 90s, so if that tells you anything, she always got us little disposable cameras anytime we went on vacation. So I have lots of really bad photos from my childhood vacations. But that kind of informed what I ended up doing when I went to school. So I graduated quite a while ago, 2011. So I guess I'm a very post-baccalaureate resident, but this is the Ernie Pyle School of Journalism. This is where I spent a lot of my days when I was at Indiana University, learning how to tell stories, other people's stories, how to hear from people, how to put those into photos, how to put those into videos, how to put those into the written word. And luckily, this is the only photo that's not mine in this presentation. So I did put a credit in there to Matt Bagala. I'm a little bit disappointed that the Ernie Pyle School of Journalism doesn't exist anymore. It's now the Media School at Indiana University, but you can still visit Ernie Pyle Hall if you go down there. It's now the admissions office at Indiana University, and it still has journalism plastered across the door, so they still represent. After I graduated from IU, my partner, Peter, and I moved to Washington, D.C. This is a photo from downtown Washington, D.C. If any of you, I can't remember, Peter could probably tell me which metro stop this was at, but this was right outside my old office. And this was a beautiful sunset evening. I couldn't help but stop and take a photo of it when I was walking home from work one day. I moved to DC to work in communications for various associations, and ended up by chance applying to a job at the National Geographic Society, and ended up getting that job, which was an absolute dream of mine. When I was a kid, I used to dumpster dive in the recycling bins at our local supermarket, and I would dig through just to find the National Geographic magazines. And have always been inspired by the photos and the stories that are in those. And having an opportunity to work there really exposed me to a lot of imagery and storytelling that has definitely influenced kind of how I approach photography and the kinds of things that I like to tell stories about, which are stories about people, stories about their history, stories about different cultures and things of that like. And these are two teachers that I worked with who are absolutely fantastic. I worked in their education department, even though I didn't actually do any photography or anything while I was there. And after after the pandemic started, my partner and I, we moved back to Indiana. So I got to move back to the family farm and spent a lot of time with, again, back in nature and with all the animals on the farm. And I have so many photographs of chickens, you wouldn't believe it. But these are some of the shots from that time in our lives. And then we ended up here in Kalamazoo. When we moved here, Peter actually started working for the KIA, and I got to steal his free class credits, and I started taking classes with Brent and doing metal sculpture and things of that like. And then I decided I wanted to take a black and white photography class because I've done plenty of digital photography, but the actual process of moving things from film, taking images on film and turning that film into something that you can actually put onto paper was like magic to me. And so that's when I took my first class with Mary, and I took some of these photos here that you see, and we're going to walk through some other ones. But it's really again, that like magic. It's just kind of mind blowing to me still, even though I know what the process is and I know how to do it. Being able to take something that exists in real life, put it onto a little piece of plastic, and then to get that plastic to, actually recreate that image for you is kind of mind blowing. So these are some photos from downtown Kalamazoo. As I was, when I first started the residency program, we had experienced some loss in our family, and that was kind of one of the things that informed the things that I was doing early on in this photography residency. Thinking about the objects and the places that not only tell you the story about somebody, but also just remind you of your history with them. And so that's what kind of inspires this quote here from Nan Golden, who absolutely loved Nan's work and is one of the photographers that's really influenced me throughout this process. And so this photo in particular kind of embodies that, Sorry, I just need to compose myself for a second. I'm going to take a drink of my coffee and pretend that I'm not emotional up here. But, having photographs of family and friends in particular can kind of give you that record of your life with them and your time with them. As I was first thinking about what are the things that I want to put into this residency show, that's kind of what immediately stood out to me. I want to start thinking about, what are the images and the objects that you can photograph that kind of give you that sense of loss and give you that, reminder of a person without them actually being there. And thinking about how that translates, not just in, your personal life, but also how do we experience that as communities? So this is an example, this image here is an example of that. The local Rock of Ages church on the north side of town. It used to be a building that was embodied by so many people. Every Sunday they would go there and they would worship, and now it's just kind of empty and just kind of a shell of what it formerly was, which kind of embodies that kind of sense of loss, at a higher level than just what a person experiences personally. And so this is where I'm wishing I had my notes. And so that's it kind of, I started exploring Kalamazoo and taking looks at just looking at the things that were around us, things that we might not necessarily notice, and was building up a body of work that kind of reflected that impetus, that sense of, having someone there without not being there anymore. And so some of these images here are just random things around Kalamazoo that As I was walking around doing my little photo walks before class, I would kind of pick up on and snap images of. So with that, well, we'll get out of that stuff. Some of my past work, I also really, really enjoy taking night photos in particular, which can be really difficult, especially if you don't have a flash. You have to really learn how to make your settings right. Make sure that you've got your ISO up as high as it can go, if that means anything to anyone, and making sure you've got your aperture open as far as it can go. And so a bunch of this stuff here are, shots of, in particular, Washington, D.C. So I've taken some trips back and forth there. And that's actually a great spot to take night photos because there is so much light from all the street lights and the street lamps and things like that. So you can kind of take advantage of those and still get some pretty good shots. So this is some of the past work. These were the one all the way over on the right, a photo from the DC Metro. The one in the middle, I honestly can't remember where that was, but it's a very foreboding image, and it just always kind of like sticks out in my brain. And then the one on the left was after a hockey match. And I don't know if this guy was waiting for a taxi or an Uber or what, but he didn't expect me to take his photo. And luckily he had his back turned, so I don't know if he knows that I did. But and also just I also am really drawn to architecture. So my grandfather was a history teacher, and his specific practice was the history of architecture. So he owned this old Victorian house when I was a kid that we would play in, and he would constantly be working on it and always telling us stories about the different kinds of architecture that he was interested in. And so architectural photography is also really interesting to me just for that historical aspect. But then also you can just get really, really interesting images. And the one on the left is the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C. The one on the right is the fountain at the National Sculpture Garden in DC as well. This is also at the National Sculpture Garden. So this is just kind of an example of humans and the human story in landscapes and places. These are here in DC. These are at here in Kalamazoo. We're not in DC. At the Pride Festival. And again, the one on the right is a night photo, or it was at dusk, but it was very interesting getting this onto film, and then also translating it into a digital image, which I should say that when I first started doing all of this work, I wanted to stick purely with film and kind of those hands-on processes, putting it on paper. I found that while I do love printing images, I really also enjoy being able to digitize them and manipulate them digitally, just because you can go through a lot more images and you can produce a lot more images that way than you can if you're just printing them all out. But there's something about an image that's shot on film that just has like kind of a softness and a graininess to it that just still appeals to me, even when it gets translated into a digital image. And some more. One on the left, again, from the Kalamazoo Pride, and then the two on the right, those are from DC. So my residency experience, I have to start out by saying thank you again to Lori Pruitt and Chris Walker and to Dan Selvage, who are three instructors in the photography/digital media department. I took a couple of classes with Chris Walker. One of them was architectural photography, and that was a great learning experience for me because, well, first off, I got to shoot stuff on digital, but then also learning from Chris the kind of fundamentals of how to actually put a building in an image and make it look good without some of the the camera effects that you get. For example, in this one here, when I shot it from the ground, and so the building itself looked a little bit skewed. And through his class, we learned methods to be able to like straighten things out. So the sides of the building are parallel with the sides of your image, and it just gives it a crisper, better kind of looking image. And so here are a few more from architectural photography. There's I can't remember the name of the hospital over on the left. And then Brent probably recognizes that hallway in the middle. That's from the metal sculpture studio all the way down to the ceramic studio. I saw that all the doors were open one day and I was like, okay, I got to get a picture of this. So, and you can see somebody down there at the very, very end, probably mixing clay or doing something of that sort. And also through the residency program, I took a couple of photogravure classes. Those were with Mary and Lori Pruitt. And this was really interesting to me just as a way of like getting the image onto the paper. It's kind of an old school method. It's very similar to Audrey's lithograph image of Venice, except it's on a metal plate instead of on a stone. And this is I really love the gravure process in particular, also because my mother used to work at a print shop. I shouldn't call it a shop. It's actually a print company. They printed things like Budweiser labels and Ticketmaster tickets and stuff like that. But most of the stuff they did was gravure, which I didn't really know until I started talking to her about this gravure class. And she's like, oh yeah, that's the process that I used every day at work. And except it was on giant metal wheels instead of these little metal plates. So it's pretty cool that I ended up getting to make that extra connection. And so this is a little shot from my partner's studio. So this is his tchotchke cabinet. And then a couple of outdoor nature shots. I love bugs. And so like a bunch of the photos on my phone are bugs and flowers and things like that. So that's where a bunch of these came from. All right, so for this one, I want to encourage you all to take out your phones if you can. So I don't have a ton of photos of my actual processes, like in the darkroom and stuff like that, just because I don't often pull my phone out in the darkroom because you can accidentally expose your paper and stuff like that. But one of the things that I do when I've developed film and before I make a contact sheet with it, I'll put the film onto a light box, and you can look at the film through a little magnifying glass so you can get an idea of whether the image is in or out or blurry or whatnot. But Mary taught me this trick, and if you pull out your phone and do a search in your settings, if you've got an iPhone, it's called Classic Invert. And let me pull out my phone in case anybody... I actually have a shortcut on my home screen now for this because I've used it so often. But if you turn on Classic Invert, it'll change all of the colors in your phone to like the opposite colors. And then if you open up your camera app and point it at the screen, then you'll see that those negatives become positive images. And that's one of the ways that I will kind of explore my film negatives. And thank you again, Mary, for teaching me about this. So this is a great way to, before you do a contact sheet, you can kind of take a look through your images. And so many images in my film roll now are just images of negatives. And I'll turn on my Classic Invert and I'll just go through and I'll look at them and see whether or not they're images that I like, if they're blurry, if there's something that I ultimately want to print or digitize. But all right, if you haven't had a chance, I'll leave it up for just one more second so you can take a look at that. And this guy up here, this is Peter. He's sitting in the back row. So we've got lots of photos of him and our dog. All right. So some of the works that I have in progress. So I mentioned when I first started thinking about what I wanted to put into the residency show, it was really thinking about, stories about loss and people in our lives and our personal stories and kind of how we can kind of, images of objects and landscapes that embody that kind of sense of loss. But as life has happened, as things have happened, as I've gotten experience going out and shooting live events in particular, this is at the No Kings in October. I have kind of taken a little bit of a different bent, and this is not quite a preview of what I'm going to have in the residency show, but it gives you an idea of what I will have in the residency show. And these are photos of protests in particular. I don't know who said it exactly, but all art is political on some level. And so I'm kind of taking that to the max with some of my current work and some of the things that I'm working on for the show. Thinking about people's right to protest. How do people protest? What are the things that people are protesting, especially in this day and age? And so these are some examples just of some of the shots that I got in October at the No Kings protest. And if you come to the residency show, you'll get to see some very similar images that will be printed. They were shot on film. And they'll also be manipulated in some interesting ways. So I don't want to tell you all too much. I want to leave it, leave a little bit of intrigue there, so you all actually come out to the show. But this is kind of where my current work is focused, is thinking about people's First Amendment rights and their right to protest in particular. And so, kind of want to leave with this quote from Susan Sontag, who Mary gave me her book, and on photography. I wish I could say that I've read it all, but I managed to pull this quote from it, so I will finish it eventually. And this is kind of ultimately, I think, the thing that really, given what I've learned in school, what I've experienced in life, the thing that intrigues me the most about photography is, it's an art form that isn't necessarily about constructing things. So there are aspects of construction and composition and things like that in a photograph, but really it's about capturing a piece of the world, a piece of time, a piece of somebody's story, and putting that into art. And so for future thoughts, I honestly don't have a ton for this slide. I'm mostly worried about getting through the residency show. But in all likelihood, after the show, after I've had time to kind of decompress from a little bit, I imagine I'll be continuing to take classes here at the KIA. I wish I could go off and do other residencies and kind of live the life of adventure that Aubrey's got planned for herself. But, we've kind of created a home here in Kalamazoo. Thinking of, I've definitely been exploring ways like, how can I get photography into various places, for Art Hop, in shows. I've put some of my photos into some competitions, mostly online competitions, and managed to get one accepted for a digital show. But yeah, so mostly at this point, getting through the residency program, making sure I do a good job for the show, and then moving on from there, one step at a time. But so with that, any thoughts, questions? And thank you all for paying attention. Yeah.
Black and white photographs, I just really admire there so much. Just like the darks and some darks. Like as a printmaker, I'm always looking for that, the darks and the lights, and then the contrast in between. And I'm just wondering, is that something you do technically, or is it like, how do you do that? I mean, is that like paper, or how do you develop it, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you're printing them on paper, that's definitely, it's a matter of your exposure time and what kinds of filters you're using. With these on the screen here, they've been digitized. And so it can be a little bit difficult sometimes translating something from film into digital, just because it's difficult to get those darks in that. Sometimes they turn out kind of gray and muddy a little bit. But within Photoshop or in Lightroom, you kind of have this the same set of tools, except they're sliders instead of like physical tools that you're using to really boost up the darks and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of these have been pretty heavily manipulated in Lightroom in particular, which is the one I tend to use to make sure that the darks are where you want them to be. And actually, I can go back here. There's one image in particular. So this one here on the left, the Hirshhorn, I've actually got a couple versions of that one. This one definitely emphasizes those darks, but the other version I have is a much lighter version so that you can kind of see the figure on the bench there a little bit better. Is much lighter, especially like up in the top left corner, and gives a very, very different feel overall. So that's definitely one of the fun things about, film photography or photography in general, is that you can kind of play with those different values to kind of, bring out different aspects of the image, or to essentially tell a different story with something. So great question. Yeah.
You touched on when you started in film, you used the disposable cameras. I was curious because I do have some film background and also digital, what equipment you use or prefer.
Yeah, so I have been using a Pentax K1000. Literally, I got it from Mary, and at one point she told me that camera and I worked really well together, and so we've been together ever since. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Brent.
So I've been fortunate enough to see your work for a while and to see like a really strong dynamic you have curve and line, even in like your 3D work. So it's neat seeing these through lines, and also I'm interested in the through line of journalism. Like I wouldn't ask you to define yourself like you consider yourself a journalist, but how much does that inform your work?
It definitely, journalism definitely informs my work. So, there are some images that I've taken that, let's see if I can get back to it, that are, I guess you like this one in the middle, you could almost consider it abstract. But really it's images that have people in them, that have people doing something, that seem to record some kind of moment in time that really captures my attention, I suppose, in a way that, doing more like abstract photography doesn't necessarily tickle my brain in quite the same way. And I kind of love that aspect, that Venn diagram of photography, where it can be art, but you can also tell somebody's story with it at the same time, that really kind of piques my interest and really draws me to this particular art form. And being able to tell somebody's story in a beautiful way. So, being able to have these kinds, like an image on the right where it's very compositional, but then you also see, and they're almost kind of like literally a backdrop to the image, just the people who are sitting there. And then, so you've got these things that kind of draw you into the image that compositionally look really beautiful. And then as you look closer, you realize that there is a story that's happening there. There's some kind of some event with people that's kind of unfolding in the background.
Luke,
Yeah.
you're continuing to shoot your themes, so I'm really interested in your storyline around the ghosts. So the inanimate images that are showing the absence of people. So are you continuing to shoot that as you go forward as like a recurring theme in your work, or do you sort of go like through time periods and then sort of drop and then take it up?
Yeah.
Is it like an intentional process for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a little bit of ADHD, so it's kind of like I'll do a thing for a little bit and then I'll move on to another one, but then I ultimately tend to like go back to something else. Yes, it does. But Yeah, I think that's definitely a theme that I see myself continuing to explore. Especially, like right now I'm focused on, it's almost, I guess, event-based photography where, you go out, you'll find people who are doing a protest or who are participating in some kind of event or something like that. But the theme of like absence is something that is really easy to return to, just because it's easier to spot. Because there are always things out in our environment, especially when you start looking for them, that just remind you that somebody was there, but they're not there anymore. And anytime I'm going out with my camera, that's ultimately, that's definitely something that kind of, if something captures my eye, then it's something I'm going to take a photo of. And so, yeah, I definitely see myself continuing to explore that theme. And I took the bookmaking class with Mary and Lori, and that was ultimately the theme of the book that I ended up making. And I wish I would have brought it with me, but I was in a rush this morning and forgot. But yeah. All right. I feel like I've gone way over my time too, but so feel free to cut me off. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all so much. I will get back to